Hi, I'm David Smith. I'm the co-founder and head performance coach here at Absolute Health and Performance. And today I'm going to talk to you a little about how we go about forming your program structure. So, the perfect program, never completed, doesn't help anyone. So the first thing that we need to go through is a detailed interview process, find out a lot more about the person, find out a lot more about the individual, understand their time commitments, their likes and their dislikes, things they've done well in the past, things they haven't done well in the past, and understanding what we have to work with, both with time restraints, both with personality types. That's when we can start to form the overview of what this program might look like. One thing that's really important to gather is people's training history, because if we understand their previous background, we can work out the kind of things they like, the kind of things that they don't like, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, and also understand the type of technical levels we can start the programming at. When going through the initial interview process, one of the really important things we'll initially gather is understanding their injury history. Understanding previous pathologies can help form opinions and help form the types of testing that we will then look at when we go to the physical assessment. The overall physical assessment can include, but is not limited to, things like anthropometry, and this would include body measurements, body weight, skin fold type assessments. And now these have to be used appropriately, because it's not suitable for everyone, and research would suggest that if we have really external focused goals, such as the physical outcomes of losing weight or getting ripped, whatever the term you want to use, the compliance is often lower. Once we've headed out onto the floor, after the potential anthropometry type assessment, we'll be looking at movement capacity. Now, the type of things that you look at, there is millions of different movements you could assess someone. So it needs to be specific to the individual, their injury history, their background, and ultimately what they're looking to achieve. But everyone, I would like to see some basic patterns that understand how they squat, how they hinge, how they rotate, how they lunge, how they push, how they press. And what we find in those may allow me to then delve a little deeper and be a little bit more specific on where areas I think could be worked on, where their strengths lie, where their weaknesses lie, where their imbalances are. So once we've gathered all the information, I've done all the physical assessment, it's important to then create a training priorities list. Understanding we're not working with professional athletes the majority of the time who don't have unlimited time and resources to commit to their training. So we need to work out what are the big rocks, what are the key priorities, and that will start to formulate what we are targeting, at least initially, for the training program. When it comes to exercise selection, we of course need to consider the aims of the program, but this is why we need to understand the client's individual training age and training history. The barbell squat may be the most effective way to improve lower body strength, but it's not necessarily relevant for every individual. So understanding how someone moves, what their competencies are, and what their background is in this particular environment will help to formulate the type of exercises we can then pull and put into the program design. Once we understand the type of movements we're wanting a client to go through within their programs, it's understanding how they then fit in the program design, how they are sequenced through the movements. So exercise sequencing is important, because at the start of a session someone's fresh, at the end of a session someone's tired. So it's important that the bigger, more complex, more challenging exercises are utilised at the start of the session, and then the lower, isolated, control type patterns, which someone can achieve safely when fatigued, are further down through the session. With regarding exercise sequencing, we also need to look at the overall week. If someone is an endurance-based athlete, we might need to prioritise some of their endurance training earlier in the week when they're fresher. If it's a power-based athlete or a field-based athlete and they've got a game on the weekend, that also changes the way we sequence not just the individual exercises in a day-to-day program, but how each of those days then fall into the week. Once I've put together the program design, the exercise selections and how it's going to look across the week, with the bigger picture always in mind, it's time to step back and have a look at the balance of the program. Say for example, I have an individual that needs to be focusing on their posture more than their pushing strength. I need to go back and reflect, have I had appropriate balance of exercise selection where I've put a little bit of dominance into pull patterns versus overusing a push pattern? For an office-based worker, we tend to see people can be a lot more thigh dominant and not really utilising their hips. So I'll also like to look at, have I balanced my hinging versus my lunging versus my squatting type patterns? Training volume refers to individual sessions, the week, the month, the year, but what we're going to talk today about is just how we set apart that first program. So training volume is essentially a combination of sets, reps, load, whether it be kilometres run or time, sprints, whatever that might be. The volume is the overall work that we put through the body. Someone with high levels of experience and have a very recent training background will be able to tolerate a much higher volume than someone who was just starting out. And this is important because if we go too high on volume for someone to be able to tolerate, the risks of injury rapidly increase, the risks of enjoyment decrease, and compliance drops away. Training intensity and resistance programs is usually determined by the sheer load that is used, measured in kilograms or pounds. As someone starting out with their program, you'll probably see they'll use lower loads with a higher repetition, and this is to allow people to develop better movement competency, and as they progress through their training phases and appropriate levels of periodization, you will see that progress to higher loads and lower overall volume in number of reps. Now, intensity can be determined using kilograms, but everyone knows you're not going to approach each training session feeling exactly the same. So using an RPE scale where you get people to auto-regulate their intensities is a much safer and more effective way with regard to designing the type of load that someone will take with that day. As an example, I may be able to squat 100 kilos for 5 reps, but if I'd had a really tough weekend, I hadn't slept as well, or I had a really busy day at work, that 100 kilos might feel like 120 for me that day. So instead, I would program 5 reps at an RPE 8, rate of perceived exertion. Using auto-regulated intensities will allow a client to feel much more sense of achievement across their training volumes and reduces the risks of a failing rep, therefore reducing the outcome of the training session. Anyone can make a client or athlete tired and sweaty, but it takes skill, experience, and education to make someone better.